The strength of the German army in 1944 is underestimated by almost all sources. To put it mildly, looking at World War II in hindsight, most of them give the Wehrmacht a real crimp after the Battle of Kursk. From that moment, the war was supposedly predetermined, and its completion was a matter of time. In reality, for the participants of events on all fronts, such a position is an insult to their exploits, because even at the end of 1944, Germany had a lot to offer the Allies. A vivid example of this is the Operation Market Garden, the last major victory of the Wehrmacht in the Second World War and a possible reason why Berlin eventually went to the USSR. The question of the German capital was acutely on the agenda after the Allied landings in Normandy. In fact, all its success is broken by one nuance. Normandy is the territory of France. From Omaha Beach, which stormed the British and American troops in July 1944, to the German border, it's 333 miles in a straight line, and on the roads, it's more than 400. To Berlin was generally more than 600 miles. The USSR, give or take, was liberating the territory of Belarus at the same time and was a little closer to Berlin from its side. But the eastern and western groups of the Allies were still very far away from the borders of Germany. Few people doubted the victory at that time, but the task before the anti-Hitler coalition was still difficult, at least geographically. And in the meantime, both wanted to take Berlin. We think that the importance of capturing the capital of the instigator of the bloodiest war in history does not need to be explained. Everyone understood that in the mass consciousness, the main winner would be the one who would raise his flag over the enemy capital. And at the subsequent negotiations on the redistribution of the territory of Europe, more points would be given to those who captured more of these territories. The plan of the USSR to rush to Berlin is a separate story, which we will remove if you demand it in the comments. Now we are interested in the plan of the Western Allies. Initially, it was as simple as a penny: land, surround, capture, and repeat the procedure all the way to Berlin. This is a brief description of Operation Cobra, which began immediately after the Normandy assault. But by September 1944, it was clear that there were problems with the plan. Compared to the Eastern Front, the Western Front line is hard to call a front. Yes, France was liberated by the end of August, but in the Battle of Paris, for example, both sides had just over 40,000 men. 500,000 fought for tiny Babruisk in June 1944. On the Western Front, Germany initially concentrated not so many forces. And even so, most of them were on the Siegfried Line, the most powerful defensive rampart on the borders of Germany and France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. And as soon as the Allies reached it, the problems began. While the USSR was rushing toward Berlin with the tenacity of a steam locomotive, the US and Britain were experiencing huge supply problems. In fact, supplies were delivered to the front lines only by truck. The ports and railroads of Germany and the Allies themselves had been destroyed beforehand, and hitting the Siegfried Line risked turning into picking the wall with a fork. What to do in such a case? British General Bernard Montgomery had a simple answer: land paratroopers, skirt the Siegfried Line from the backside, and surround it, and if lucky, to cause such a panic deep into Germany that Berlin would surrender to the Allies. Montgomery, in early September, even said that the British would reach the capital of the Reich 2-3 weeks after the start of such an operation. The future US president at the time, Army Commander Eisenhower, had some doubts, but the next strikes with V-2 missiles on London right during the planning forced Britain to press hard. After all, the missiles were launched just under Hague, the territory that was to be captured as part of such an offensive. Thus was born the plan of operation codenamed Market Garden. The date of its beginning was determined on September 17th, and the terms of the capture of Berlin were specified until Christmas of the same year. To be more precise, there were 2 operations. The first, Market, meant the landing in the south of the Netherlands, which seized the main bridges and went to the backside of the Rhine River. The second operation, Garden, was the ground part of the big plan, in which the infantry, with the help of armored vehicles on foot, paved the way for the paratroopers, who held a bridgehead deep behind the front line. We are talking about almost 70 miles. Such a distance, according to Montgomery's plan, the ground group had to cover in 2 days, and at least the forward units had to link up with their paratroopers, thereby securing the bridgehead captured by the paratroopers. It sounds rather adventurous, but at the time of the First World War, it could be said to be a classic of the genre. German paratroopers used such a scheme to capture Belgium, the Netherlands, and other territories. Almost a complete repetition of the schemes already working in the war and planned by the Allies in the operation. The only difference is the scale. If in 1941, Germans landed 6,000 paratroopers on Crete, the US and Britain planned to send 35,000 soldiers, 568 artillery pieces, and 2,000 jeeps to the rear of the enemy. Although with some nuances, Market Garden was the largest airborne landing in history. As the saying goes, what could have gone wrong?
This video is brought to you by Thorum. Take a look at this rings. They have rings made from 4 billion-year-old Gibeon meteorite and genuine 65 million-year-old T-Rex bone. If you are a fan of Vikings, they have Odin ring, the Norse god of war, the Thor ring, and all of them are crafted by hand. Head the link in the comments and use promo code LIVINGHISTORY to get 20% off a truly unique ring.
It was felt on their own skin on September 17, 1944, by British paratroopers, whose pilots, being under dense fire from Wehrmacht air defenses, landed as far as 6 miles from the bridge over the Rhine River at the Dutch Arnhem. And not even in a heap, but sprayed over a large area, while the fighters were gathering, trying to establish communication, which, in the best traditions, was cut off. No effective surprise could be discussed. As a result, only one battalion of Lieutenant Colonel John Frost reached the desired goal instead of several thousand men. Some units were ambushed, some were surrounded and forced to sit in defense, and some were simply moving slower than planned. Things with the Americans were plus or minus the same. Plus, the bridges in Eindhoven and Gravel still managed to be taken. Minus, these bridges were closest to the land units. The British, who held the remote and key part of the operation, were much less fortunate. Their problems were compounded by the problems of the land group. Executing the second part of the plan, Garden troops of General Brian Horrocks, as you remember, were supposed to cover almost 60 miles to the landing sites of the farthest parts of the landing in 2 days. In reality, on September 17th, only 5 miles were covered, and that in some areas. In some places, it was not possible to advance even 3 miles. After 48 hours, General Horrocks reached only relatively close to the landed American units. To the coveted bridgehead on the Rhine, which was held by the British, more than 25 miles remained. Instead of 2 days, the battalion of the previously mentioned John Frost fought for 3 days before being forced out of the cherished bridge. Even the emergency Polish parachutists, again they were dropped wherever they could, scattered and destroyed by Wehrmacht fire, did not help. And the supplies that the British dropped from airplanes on September 23rd almost entirely fell on German positions. The land group was desperately trying to make its way to their own, but not only did it not advance, but it also periodically faced very dangerous counterattacks by the Wehrmacht. In the end, the lightning-fast 48-hour operation turned into a week-long meat grinder, at the end of which the surviving British units were ordered to retreat on September 25th. This was the end of the ambitious Operation Market Garden. Traditionally, it is considered to be the last major victory of the Wehrmacht in World War II, and in modern sources, the reason why the US and Britain lost the chance to be the first to capture Berlin. In reality, as always, things are a bit more complicated. Even General Montgomery himself, the author of the operation plan, admitted that Berlin left the Western Bloc not on September 25th, but much earlier when, after the landing in Normandy, another, much larger plan was not developed. There is a sense in the words of the general because unequivocally the Operation Market Garden cannot be called a defeat. The Allies still knocked Germany out of the main launching points of V2 in London, gained a foothold in the Netherlands, and got a good bridgehead on the other side of the Siegfried Line. Yes, for every German killed, 5 Allied soldiers were killed, but the losses were mostly in the most ambitious and problematic section. And that is, there is a very strong theory that the key to the problems was a German spy who leaked all the details of the operation a week before it began. The essence of General Montgomery's words is that now the importance of the Market Garden operation is greatly exaggerated. The key to the capture of Berlin, the landing on the Rhine, was not even close, if only because the scale of battles on the Western Front does not compare with the Eastern. Neither 35,000 paratroopers, nor twice as large a ground force, nor another equal number of reinforcements from the Market Garden operation could have taken Berlin in 2 weeks, even if the plan had worked 100%. The Soviets took Berlin with a 2 million strong force, of which a quarter directly stormed the city. Only killed Soviets lost there 75,000 people. Such forces neither the USA nor Britain on the Western Front banally did not have. Their only chance was the very panic in the German leadership, about which General Montgomery spoke. For a real ground operation to capture the capital of the Reich, forces required many times more than what, even taking into account the reinforcements planned to be collected on the Rhine. You don't have to go far for proof. When in April 45 the USSR fought for the Zilo Heights, 40 miles from Berlin, the Allies, even having lost in Market Garden, stood only 75 miles from the German capital on the other side, but did not dare to go to the assault. This decision of Commander Eisenhower is still called controversial, but in reality, the future President of the United States saved tens of thousands of lives of his soldiers. Together with General Bradley back in March of the victorious year, Eisenhower very accurately predicted the losses in a potential assault on the capital, and the commanders agreed that it was not worth it. Moreover, on the Western Front, the Americans moved like a knife through butter, which alarmed the leadership, who feared German counterattacks. They never happened. As we know, Hitler's mystical fortress in the Alps turned out to be mystical. But ex post facto, it is not quite right to condemn the general's actions. In reality, in Montgomery's opinion, and in Eisenhower's opinion, Berlin was lost not in the fall of 1944, and perhaps not even in the summer, and the Operation Market Garden only showed that even at the end of the war, Germany could resist quite successfully if it wanted to. See you again, folks.